Hello, buongiorno to the audience. Welcome to the Hotel and Tourism Forum Milan in its first online edition here on Hopin. And I'm very honored to be the moderator of the panel titled Hotel Brands in Conversation with European Leaders. So who are the European leaders that we gathered here today? In alphabetical order, according to the last name, I'm happy to welcome Gemma Basterrechea, Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer at the Radisson Hotel Group. We have Fabrizio Gaggio, Managing Director of Gruppo Una, the largest Italian hotel group operating in Italy. We have Marlus Knittenberg, the CEO of Curtain Hospitality. We have Markus Lehnert, Vice President, International Hotel Development at Marriott International. And then there is a fifth panelist, which you're unable to see right now because he volunteered, or he was volunteered to remain for a few minutes backstage. We also have Thomas Wilms, the CEO of Deutsche Hospitality. Just to explain to the audience, we have the situation here on hoping that only 5 people can be on the main stage simultaneously. That means we will always have to send one person to the backstage and play a little bit of charade or musical chair even, so you have to fight for your presence here on the main stage with brilliant answers. The structure of this panel this afternoon is twofold. So in the beginning, I would like to do a little analysis and reflection with the leaders we have gathered here today on how they cope with the current situation, with the current crisis. And in the second part, I want to focus on the tomorrow. So how do we come out of this crisis together as an industry? What are the positive aspects of this Corona crisis? And I want to kick it off with a more personal question to all of you. And Marlus, why don't you kick it off? The question is, when did you actually realize that the outbreak of the coronavirus is developing into something seriously threatening? What was that moment? Is there any particular event you can recall? You went like, oops, this is gonna be nasty.
Yeah, I think when I...
Go ahead.
I think when I couldn't go home anymore. So I was 2 weeks in Saudi Arabia, and I was one of the last people to be able to leave. I went to Turkey and I stayed in Turkey for 4 weeks. And there was one plane out to go back to Italy via London, Frankfurt, Rome to drive to Milan. And then to go into quarantine for 2 weeks. Now, having traveled 275 days of the year for the last couple of years, I think it was the first time I understood the restrictions that were actually in place and how serious the matter was.
Okay. Gemma, you are in Brussels right now, if I understand correctly. So what was for you that moment where you realized, you know, as an executive board member of a global hotel group, oops,
I was in Brussels and I was about to fly to Milan. It was more or less by the end of February. I was supposed to be on a Tuesday in Milan to participate in some program at the Bocconi University and also to close some deals there. And I got a phone call at 5 o'clock in the morning. I was lucky because I was supposed to take an early flight, 6 o'clock on Sunday. And I got a call from Magda Antonioli from Bocconi telling me that all the university and all the course, everything has been suspended. And then from then onwards, I started also to see the evolution of our hotel in Milan, the different hotels in Italy, and we realized there was something big. Before that, we were monitoring on a daily basis the situation in China, but everyone is suspecting that the situation was, let's say, remaining there and isolated and let's say controlling there. But yeah, it was early it was at the end of February. It was at the early stage of this outbreak. Yeah.
Markus, in Nuremberg currently.
I was traveling for a very nice romantic weekend to Venice, and when we came off the plane, we were actually asked by a number of paramedics to take our temperature. And this was such an unusual step. First of all, you had a control where there was not supposed to be a border control or any kind of control. And secondly, you had someone with an apparatus checking your temperature. And that was something where you suddenly had this inkling, if this comes over here, it could be very, very big. It was 7th of February, so it wasn't there yet, but it came soon enough after that.
Fabrizio, what about you?
Yeah, the first advice is that really this was a crazy situation was when we had the last board before the real crisis on the 5th of February, and we were in Bologna, and we were discussing about some cancellation that suddenly arrived from China, and we were very scared about that because we realized that something was really happening and was not similar to the past. And we just realized that in that moment, we were so weak in terms of system, in terms of industry. How can you control that? And just 2 weeks later, a good friend of mine who is a super marathon athlete called me about the story of this patient one, the first patient in Codogno. And this guy was a colleague of him, and they just finished some training the day before. And say, they are closing us down. Tomorrow you will see on the press. And so everything exploded, and everything fell down the day after on the 22nd.
We know the rest of the story. Thomas, what was that moment of truth for you as the CEO of Deutsche Hospitality, but also on a personal level where you realized, wow, okay, there's something
going on
bad happening?
Well, some of you might know that we have Chinese shareholders. So our closing of the deal selling Steigenberger and the Deutsche Hospitality was on the January 2nd. So from January 3rd to the 13th, I spent the time in Shanghai. Don't worry, nothing happened to me. So I was there very early. At that stage, it was
That's what everyone says all the time. Do you know this phenomenon? As soon as someone sneezes or coughs these times, it's almost immediately accompanied by, don't worry, it's not Corona.
Yeah, that's true. But at that stage, it was not known. So even about 10 days later, but I came back then on the 13th and 14th, and then it hit our Chinese shareholders and colleagues, obviously, right? And then we did video conferences like this all the time, and people came in the offices and were measuring sort of the temperature while we were speaking in this situation like this, and they all had masks. And for us, this was in a way far away. In a way, it was far away. However, I could see that something is coming, and as we know, it took a little more. Couple of weeks till it hit Italy very badly, and then Ischgl and all these environments. So for me, this was shocking in a way. And maybe on the good side, I always try to see the good things. We knew a lot from our Chinese shareholders and colleagues what was happening in China. Obviously, in this sort of environment, it went much stricter. You just cover up 60 million people and fence them. That didn't happen, obviously, in Europe, and with even 16 states in Germany, it doesn't happen like that. But I was in a way warmed and mentally prepared. Yeah.
So, Markus, we've been knowing each other for many, many years. That's why I dared to ask you another personal question. What were your darkest thoughts in face of this pandemic, both on a personal and on a professional level? Well, more at the beginning of this.
I mean, we didn't really know what was going to happen. Yeah, we didn't know how fatal this could be, what the courts were. Frankly, we still don't. My darkest thought was this could be a Spanish flu-like epidemic that could raise millions off the face of the earth. And that was certainly the darkest thought. It was purely on health. I don't think I thought too much about the professional side of things. After I realized that you could do something with certain measures to avoid this, I was all in favor of doing this. I looked with shock and horror and a certain anger as well to what happened in Spain and Italy, because those countries didn't really do anything in order to deserve this. There were some other countries, nobody deserves this, but there were other countries that ignored advice and they got a hefty bill for it in the end. I think that is something which were my darkest thoughts. After that, I retracted very quickly to something big is going to change. We saw in the beginning a lot of people moving together, coming together, helping each other. We're all in the same boat. It was a sentiment that seems to evaporate now, which is a great shame. But we seem to all be there for each other, helping each other, trying to get through this. That was a very positive thought. And I thought, let's look at this philosophically until this blows in some way or the other, and we can see what kind of new order we will see in the world. In my view, we came to a traffic lights. It went on to red. The world stopped. And thereafter, there was going to be a new speed, pace, and everything going forward.
Thomas, let's leave the realm of philosophy and enter reality. As a leader, what were or still are the 3 toughest measures you needed or still need to implement as a leader during this crisis, as the CEO of Steigenberger Deutsche Hospitality?
They always, as we know, there's a triangle. It's the shareholder, it's our guest, and our associates. So treating them and worry about them in the same way is actually my main job. So when the ITV didn't happen after 30 years the first time, and after we had a great January, a great February, so we did everything right in the budget. I think the year started off well, and after 10 years of growth, we realized very fast in March, obviously, that the world is not the same anymore. So securing the jobs, really looking after our associates, keeping them, because there used to be a war of talent. So to building them up over years, keeping the culture up, while watching the security of associates and guests alike. And obviously, having a shareholder who just has spent a lot of money, obviously there's a business plan made. And I quickly realized that this business plan is for the bin. So as a leader, you have to make sure how can you secure the liquidity in a company. And so constantly discussions about liquidity plans, those KFA, government support, shareholder loans, and so on. Good news is we always were at good contracts. We never had any debt in the company, so we were in pretty okay shape. But as a hotelier, it's a dark moment to close hotels. We are just made, and our passion is to operate hotels, to welcome guests, to have fun. Closing them down was very hard for me. But it was a measurement which had to be done. Everything else would have been totally wrong. And we are still in that situation of reopening up eventually, gradually. But as we know, hotels now with 10, 15, 25% still don't make money. And this will be the rest of the year. We have a board meeting this week, so I have to the news to the shareholders again. I think it's important to stay calm and watch all these 3 stakeholders equally. That's our job.
Another personal question goes to Malus. Welcome back to the main stage. Your video is frozen now, but I hope that you can hear me. To what extent have you changed as a human being during this pandemic? Are there any particular virtues you discovered in yourself or others? Are there any new habits you introduced and will strive to maintain also as a leader? We don't have your video now, but maybe we still have your audio. It seems to struggle. Let's continue with Cema then, and let's go to more business talk. Will the tourism industry and the hospitality sector ever be the same again, or do you see a paradigm shift? Are we at the beginning of a new era in tourism and in hospitality? What will the new normal, if that exists at all, look like? What is your prediction? I mean, you're a member of an executive board. You will have to make plans. What are you discussing in those back rooms these days? Do we have to reinvent our industry?
Yeah, I mean, I think what is really very difficult as of today is to make any prediction. I mean, before Marcus was talking about the lack of visibility. I think the uncertainty and the lack of visibility are some of the factors of today's time. And also together how fragile our, let's say, civilization and world are in terms of things we change overnight. In terms of, I mean, I think our sector continues being a homemade sector. So I think that after the COVID situation that we hope that it will become, let's say, the sooner the better, there will be some elements that remain. And those elements will be applied to the introduction of technology to facilitate and ease, let's say, and simplify part of the low value added, let's say, transactions in the service promise that we deliver towards our clients. So I think operations, check-in, check-out, so digitalization to a certain extent of low value added, let's say, operational tasks will be a constant. Other than that, obviously on the short term, the many activity will shrink as it's shrinking. So most probably we need to capture, let's say, all those groups with a lot of precautions and everything. But honestly, it's my personal opinion, I think hospitality will continue to operate in the same way. I think we'll be more agile as companies and as any other type of sector or industry in adapting to the new environments and to the new situations that may happen also in the future. So for me, it's technology, it's agility, that the essence and the core values will remain, in my opinion. And again, it's very difficult to do any predictions. As of today, all the predictions are very negative, very pessimistic based on the current situation. Everything will be depending on the evolution and the level of infections and the listening effects of after a lockdown, and that may improve or may get worse depending on the evolution. So there is a lot of uncertainty in
that. Let's try Malus again. We sort of lost you, and let's combine the two questions. So the first question is: do you see a paradigm shift in our industry? Will we have to reinvent ourselves as an industry? And B, how are you coping with this as a leader? Are there any new habits you acquired, any new leadership styles that arose out of this crisis management situation? Any new virtues?
I think there's always, every crisis, I guess, brings some opportunities. And I think, when you look at the last 5 years since we started, we were always the new kids on the block, the kind of, rebels, disruptors, where we were never born to be a disruptor in any way. It's not part of what I believe in. But I think, if you look at, I traveled, like I said before, so much. I don't have a physical office. So, what has changed for me is that I know how to deal with the remote control of the TV, and I've actually been able to have breakfasts and dinners at home, which I was totally unfamiliar to. But when you look at
Okay, I think you're breaking up again. That's definitely not one of the new virtues of this era. Yeah, I think we lost her again. And let's continue with Fabrizio here. I want to hear from you as the managing director of Gruppa Una.
How often spend time with...
there she's back. No, she's not. Fabrizio, if you look at your own organization, what are the 3 best initiatives or changes you currently observe in your group? You just named the top 3 where you go like, wow, it's actually amazing that we have this initiative, that we have this change going on now in this situation.
You know, what we realized with these crises was the need to evolve and to, for sure, the liquidity issues is one of the largest issues we have in the short story of this group we ever met. We are part of the biggest group, of the largest insurance company in Europe, but of course, we need to control our cash flow. We need to control our liquidity. In order to do that, in such an extreme conditions, with a lot of uncertainty, what we realize is that we need to be very close, and so we founded 2 steering committees. One was an emergency steering committee, in order that was able to get all the information, to be really updated on everything that was happening around us. We have Just Hotel in Italy, and you know how Italy was really deep and hit by these crises, both on government side, on security side, transportations, welfare, consumptions. You know, I never closed an hotel in my life, and we were all shocked about that. So we need to be perfectly updated. And so we started to work very intensely with all the major organizations, with our group, with our lobby, in order to understand what's going on and how to react. And this was in order to have fresh information. The second one was we need to create an evolution team. Someone who is thinking a different way. Someone who is thinking we are not able to change our product in 2 months, in 3 months, in 4 months, but we are able to change our process. We are able to change our way of living, especially the way to communicate. And what I realized in this crisis was really the ability of the team to stay very strong and very compact, I can say, in order to provide information and organization on these 2 main issues. And the innovation side of the business is the only way we can face the next crisis that unfortunately will happen, especially in this country. That will be the crisis connected to the distance between the real economy and the false economy. Because we will have that by September. I expect a really turn down of this.
So I have one big question, maybe to all of you, because that's what everyone wants to know, especially those people that are investing their money into hospitality, real estate. What do you think? What hospitality products will be the big winners in this crisis, and which hospitality products maybe will be the big losers? So for whom does the future look particularly bright, and for what products not so much? Marcus, I can see that you already formulate the answer. Let's start with you. Because you have so many products in your portfolio, maybe some will perform better going forward and some others, you don't have to name them, but will struggle more.
I think something that will save us in this crisis is indeed that diversification of products that has started in the industry a few years ago, where you had specialist products and not one fits all. To come back to your question, I think those hotels that meet local demand are price-wise in a level where you can have a very significant domestic travel segment and are not necessarily dependent overly on international travel. And I think extended stay products are the ones that see perhaps the first of the green lights. I think the ones that struggle most will be the very, very large boxes with dependent on lots of international travelers, lots of conferences, conference centers. I think to see that coming back to a level to what these things have been built for, that will take a while. A lot of depends on how quickly air travel can be normalized and how can you make air travel safer. That is one of the big question marks. So I think short-term, extended stay, local demand meeting, probably economy, mid-scale segments, and then the big boxes last.
Gemma, what about you? Radisson Hotel Group. Extended stay, I don't think that's your forte right now, is it?
No,
we don't have any
we have started to develop extended stay in some locations, but I totally agree. I think that Marcus has highlighted the main factors. I mean, I think everybody in the hospitality, in the tourism sector has been impacted. So I don't think there is a winner. I think everybody has been, is under, let's say, a losing situation. And as Marcus highlighted, I mean, there are some segments in which they may accelerate the recovery. But in all cases, the factors are the factors listed by Marcus. There is how dependent you are from the domestic versus international clientele, and how fast also the markets can recover. But in any case, even those ones will be losing. We have a lot of hotels, for instance, I don't know, in the Nordics or in all locations with a high internal domestic demand, but still they are losing, they are suffering because there is a reduction in the overall business and industry activity. So the evolution of the infections is key to recover. How domestic versus international you are. Basically, those are the factors. But overall, whatever working and acting in the hospitality, in the tourism sector is a loser. I mean, has been impacted negatively. So we cannot say that even OTAs or whatsoever, they are suffering. Everybody depends on consumption. So everybody has been hit.
Thomas, let me maybe rephrase the question a little bit, because this is the question that gives me sleepless nights every now and then over the last couple of weeks. Slightly exaggerating, but this is one of my biggest questions, actually. How can we make sure that hotel investments as an asset class remain popular? How can we make sure together as an industry that project developers, owners, bankers, and investors, etc., that they keep their faith in hotel investments? Because that's, what we all depend on as an industry. I mean, obviously, yes, we depend on the end consumers, on the guests generating the revenue, but our industry around the whole development industry, we depend on growth. We depend on developers deciding to develop hotels and investors deciding to invest their money into hotels. So what is your call for action? What do we need to do as an industry these days?
Yeah, first of all, I don't disagree with the losers and the winners. However, this is only short term. So short term, we know MICE is dead at the moment. Luxury is difficult, international is difficult. But I think long term, you will not base a strategy for 20 or 30 years on a contractual agreement on a short term corona pandemic. So after 22, I think we go back to the normal segmentation. I think the diversity is important also from the investor side. But I think the major issue here is we had 13 years of printing money, amazing growth, 1 year better than the last. I always say this to my son, he is 30. So the last crisis, Lehman, was 2007, 13 years ago. They were all back in school. So managing crisis and the ones around us, amongst us who have been a little longer in the game, we had 9/11, we had Lehman. So now we have the biggest we had ever crisis. And I think it's important that the asset class hotels, that the stakeholder relationship, the trust in this crisis, the true characters. And there's a lender, there's a landlord, there is the operator, regardless if it's leased, managed, or franchise. So this now, and we have these discussions daily today, right after this one, another meeting with owners, how do we survive this crisis? Some of the banks say, okay, I don't like actually leases because in the lease scenario, the operator makes the money. And if shit hits the fan, then they come back to me anyway and don't want to pay the lease. And so why not do management contracts right away? But we also know the big funds cannot do that. So I think this relation is important, to stay calm and fair and really look at long-term relationship. We are 90 years in the game, and I know Markus is the same sort of with his company the same years. I think it's very important to keep this trust and look in the eyes and say, let's do business together. But also, let's be fair. If we have zero revenue for 4 months, it's hard to pay the lease. And deferring, forgiving, extending contracts. So this is at the moment. I think these relations, which are evolving at the moment, are very important for the future of our business. And the asset class, do the bankers still believe in it? What about the landlords? Is it office? Is it residential? Is it hotels? I think hotels will never be empty. That's a good thing about hotels. They are empty office buildings in some cities and empty flats and residences, but never hotel. There's always a strategic reason, always a marketing purpose to enter a certain city, even like Berlin. If there's so much supply already that you don't want to be there, you will always find a reason. So I believe in the asset class hotel for the future. I'm a hotelier forever, and that will come back. I think it's important that we all play safe and fair, and I hope that many of us survive this crisis, because after September, the insolvency laws will change. There might be some, and as we know, the last 12 years, there have been leases signed which were not really so smart. And the sensitivity analyses were not maybe like there would be no tomorrow, right? I think this is the big learning. This is the big learning for the operators and also for the other stakeholders.
Let's open this discussion. Markus is back. We also have Cema and Fabrizio. What do we need to do as an industry to make sure that the asset class of hotels remains the investor's darling? We've been fighting for so many years, also as advisors. It was, you sure all remember that we had difficult times, to argue with the bankers and some of the institutional end investors that it's actually a great idea to invest into hotels. And now I have those conversations also in some of those webinars where the bankers and the end investors start to doubt and challenge me, now look at the situation. There's probably no other asset class hit harder in this situation than hotels. Why should we continue investing? The big institutional investors, for example, in Germany, they also have an issue with their clients actually that just invest little amounts through funds, and they also have to have the answers ready. So what can we do as an industry to make sure that the future looks bright for hotel investments? Who wants to? Fabrizio, please.
I still think it's diversification of the portfolio. So, one of the reasons why we started looking at mixed use from the beginning is when you start, a lot of people are looking at co-working for empty lobbies, but not necessarily at how do you collaborate retail with extended stay, with short-term stay, and build kind of that community so you can provide 24/7 for whatever the demand is there. If you would have asked a year ago, everybody was saying we have to do co-working and it's all about offices and, let's take out part of the hotel and convert that into working space. And I think now that we're all much more working from home and seeing that we don't necessarily need our teams there and we can do certain tasks in the hotel, even outsourced, I think it's the conversation which we've been having for the last 2 years, which is, do you only need one asset class or you start mixing that from the beginning, is becoming a much more critical conversation. And I think if you look at institutional investors, they haven't wanted to invest in it because it's not a proven model. And, hotels in that sense, just as a specialism, is a proven model. But yes, if there's situations where you cannot fill it, it becomes a problem. Secondary cities, kind of third-tier cities weren't as interesting. Everybody has to be in Barcelona, Paris, London, etc. Now that might not be the most interesting thing anymore. It's just, how critical do you want to look at yourself or not? And I think it's just not anymore the one shoe and the one size fits all. It's can you afford to have something that's really big and only make that, a residence or an office or a hotel? Or, you know, do you have, I guess, the future vision and a part guts and the understanding?
I think we're losing her again. Cema, Fabrizio, do you want to jump in here?
I fully agree with Carlos, Cema, and Thomas about what they have said. Starting from the point that, of course, the main issue of the hotel business is related to tourism. Tourism is related to aviation. Aviation is related to aggregation. So this is a short-term crisis. I'm sure that the tourism in general will be able to recover faster, as soon as, of course, we have safety measures in place together with vaccines. I'm sure that the war is not ended for circulation in the world, both leisure and business. Of course, what we learned from this lesson is that to be strongly identified in one product, it can be risky. I make an example. We have 1,000 square meters of events room. Now they are empty. Probably we need to rethink this kind of business. Or, you know, an answer has been the smart work. The smart work has been a constraint. Has not been an opportunity for the companies, because in order to provide a good smart work process, you need to create the process. And the companies normally still in Italy, but I'm sure all over Europe, apart if you are in Cupertino in California, normally you work in your office. You are not working at home. So definitely, even the offer of the hotel business needs to change in that. So the ability to diversify, you know, several spaces inside your hotel and inside your offer can be a solution, definitely.
So, Cema, the big question, slightly unrelated to what we just discussed, but it is a question I just had to put onto this panel, because it's a topic that has popped up again and again over all those panel discussions I had over the last couple of years. This bashing of Booking.com and the bashing of Airbnb. What do you think? Is the time now to get rid of them, or will they come out of this crisis stronger than ever before?
I mean, you know, first of all, we consider them as our partners, because at the end they are selling and commercializing our products. So, and we're paying them and remunerating them as a variable cost. So, from my understanding, it's perfect. At the end of the day, I mean, we in Radisson Hotels we judge, let's say, our final profitability based on the net ADR that we're obtaining from our rooms, from our services. So at the end, if through, I mean, there are technology guidance, especially Booking.com at the end of the day, so they can grow faster introducing technology to the traveling, let's say, environment. So therefore, we shouldn't, as a company, we're investing in other parts of the, let's say, value chain, but not in that. But for me, it's kind of like a variable cost of a partner. So we are partnering very strongly with them. And of course, we're trying also to strengthen our brand web, but at the same time, we're trying to get the maximum out of themselves. At the same time, we are reshaping our sales structure according to the new market needs. So I think they are suffering as we're suffering, because they depend on volumes, they depend on tourism. So they are definitely suffering. Maybe in the short term, in some particular markets, Airbnb had some good performance, but the overall picture is that they also got impacted as Booking.com, as any OTAs, as any hotel company. And I would like to answer to add to a couple of points regarding the previous questions regarding the asset class of hotels and everything. I think by nature, also Thomas has highlighted, a hotel is a long-term investment. Never forget that, a long-term investment. So sometimes we're focusing on the peaks, on the valleys of the investment, but it's a long-term investment. So situations to a certain extent, normally they get adapted over the period of time. It is vital, the collaboration with experts like yourself, like PKF, in terms of doing the perfect matching between the investment and working together the investor and the operating company from the beginning, because it would prevent not doing, or it will help in doing in making the right investment from a financial opportunity. And the second point, in Verizon, we're working a lot in implementing the optimal operating model, because the right investment, not overspending, depending on the possibilities of each business plan, how cyclical and how our revenues fluctuate is one of the characteristics also of our business, is also pushing us and introducing the optimal operating model that can bring also our hotel owners and ourselves also, when we operate directly, to obtain the maximum profitability and to repay a very perishable business. So I think if you put all the parameters together with this revenue fluctuation that always has been a characteristic of our business, and the long-term, let's say, horizon of the investment, I think, and that's what the value added from the main and the big large hotel chains, I think, can bring the value added to that.
Okay, let's stop the Booking.com and Airbnb bashing already here again, and move on to market opportunities and analyzing the markets. I think one of my personal learnings during this current crisis is that some markets prove to be more resilient than others. It's already become obvious that probably the resort markets will be amongst the winners this year, and urban destinations will probably continue to struggle for a longer time. If that is the case, so that's my first question, do you also see that? Would you agree? And if so, will we now see a big wave of resort developments? Will this be the focus for the next couple of years? We had this discussion internally at our booth in the early afternoon, and we actually came to the conclusion that looking here at our core market in Austria, for example, there are still so many opportunities in the resort areas, you know, whereas maybe cities such as Vienna or Graz or whatever, you could challenge yourself and say, okay, do we really need so many more hotel rooms? Should we maybe shift the focus on some of the resort destinations? And then there's a third aspect to that. If that's the case, do we have the right brands? All people ask me, do we actually need more brands? My standard answer is depende, of course. I definitely see that we need more good resort brands. Let's start this with Micros, Marriott's perspective. So will we see a shift more into resorts? Do we need more brands?
I think we will probably this year see a push towards domestic vacationing, including resorts. Now, Italy is in its domestic very resorty already, so that's certainly less of an issue. Germany is always the one where people said, do we want to drive north when we really want to have sun? But I think that's a good side effect of this, that perhaps some of the more unusual resort destinations may get some attention, which may well be deserved. Would we need more hotels? I'm totally with my colleagues in the panel who said a hotel is not something you do for this season or for the next season. You do it for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. Yeah. And therefore, I think we should be careful in evaluating that and not just jump from one strategy to the next. City travel will come back just because there's a lot of business in the cities that will continue. There's a diversity in the cities. In a resort market, you
the next one that gets frozen
have pretty much one customer. Was that me? Was I frozen or am I? Yeah. Am I back?
You're back a bit.
Yes.
Thank you. So that's my thought. Do we need more brands? I think we have added a lot of brands, and I think we will probably see a lot of them disappearing. I think to establish a brand, you need to have a healthy environment, and we're just saying good.
Frozen again.
I wasn't sure. Was he saying that we will see Marriott kicking brands out of the portfolio?
No, I didn't say that.
Okay.
And I also like to add that we've only added one brand in the last 10 years. The other ones we bought, they were existing brands.
But what is a good resort brand in the Marriott's brand portfolio?
Oh, you have Westins, you have Ritz-Carltons, you have St. Regis's, you have lots of resort brands, or brands that can have a resort hotel.
But they're all in the upper upscale or luxury segments. Huh?
That's true.
Other segments? Would you do a Quartet by Marriott?
We probably see some of the lifestyle brands go into the resort market.
So that you must Deutsche Hospitality. I mean, Steigenberger for me, not to flatter you, but Steigenberger for me is one of the few brands that for me work both, in a city context and in a resort context.
Yeah, I fully agree. Thanks. I think short term, yes. Resorts at the moment are booming. Heringsdorf, Zingst, Bad Wörishofen, Konstanz. So they're all well booked. Unfortunately, only to 60% because we have restrictions there. But also long term, we feel at Steigenberger, and not Intercity and not the other brands we have. We don't have as many as Markus. But I think Steigenberger is a perfect resort brand, and it's also very accepted as resort brand. And strategically, I believe in it. We had this Greta sustainability, no flying, sort of last couple of 12 months. This discussions at the moment has paused. But there was already in the direction that the younger children, the teenagers, don't want to fly away anymore to the Maldives. And now we have the pandemic on top of it. But I think also with the demographics, people getting older. In the old days, they had the baths, in Germany, the bath. They were actually carried by the health insurances. But now I think people will actually be willing to go back to resorts, and we had many of them in Germany, and we closed many of them over the last 2 years. Actually, strategically, we want to go back to them. We think it's a good market, and if you have the right brand and you have a good spa, and it's not for the 28-year-old, but for the second season, and it is a very good sort of concept. I totally agree with that. And that will be the winners. Stay domestic, stay in Europe. And Europe is the country hit most because we have less domestic travel. We have all these borders. In Asia, they are back to normal. Our hotels in Asia, they have 5,500. Just in China, they are back to 70%. US is one country, it works. South America will suffer. And I think in Europe, we have this issue of, who's sitting on the plane today when Lufthansa flies back on the 15th? Is the banker coming from Goldman Sachs New York coming to Frankfurt, because Frankfurter Hof in Frankfurt has 70% international business. These are actually at the moment still, but that's only short term, I think. The losers, I think this comeback, consultancy will come back. At the moment, there's a travel freeze, a travel ban for Microsoft and McKinsey's and EY and all these companies. So we're living on resorts at the moment with very good rates. And I hope, I don't want to talk about Airbnb, but OTAs, I hope there will be no price war, because the hotels pay a lot of money at the moment for hygiene measurements. We calculated about 8 to 10 euros per room on extra HR, extra staff, liquids and all this sanitation stuff. I hope there is no price war amongst all of us, because that would be even worse. Making money, making profits doesn't work for this year. We all know that. Reducing losses is the game.
Can we just agree here, Gemma, Markus? So no price war?
Absolutely.
No price war.
Absolutely.
It doesn't help anybody.
Definitely.
I want to continue with you, Fabrizio and Gemma, also on this resort question. But I just have to ask Thomas two questions here. The acquisition of a stake in Sleep prior to COVID-19, does this let you sleep better or worse?
I think the segment of budget, which we didn't have before, is coming back the fastest, because all these travel managers, our partners, are at the moment under big pressure. So travel managers have to save. So no price war, but they will go star down. So from 5 to 4, from 4 to 3, and so on. So we know that Intercity, for example, is coming back much faster than Steigenberger, and even Sleep. At the moment, we have them only in the Nordics, but it's the right product for this moment in time. Absolutely. And we have only 51%, so we share the pain.
And the new ownership?
You mean our new ownership?
Better dreams now or nightmares in this situation?
No, for us, it's actually ideal, because I think there's no one who is so sort of knowledgeable about the situation, what could happen in one country, and a lot of empathy. For us, I think the former seller has picked a good moment, yes. But I think our current shareholders, Huazhu, they are so strategic. For them, this is not just an acquisition. This is not private equity. This is a very long-term acquisition. This is the first step into Europe, and we are the base for that. So I think they're still happy, not this year with the results. I cannot send over 5% return on investment this year, but hopefully that works back in 22.
So, Gemma, more Radisson Blues and other brands in resort destinations? Is that part of I was actually watching, I mean, you're a member of an executive team that is still fairly young, so to say, in the Radisson Hotel Group's history. And I watched the video where you presented the 5-year plan of the Radisson Hotel Group, which is obviously now maybe a document that you need to revise. But as you're revising it, is there a strategy on growing the resort business? Is that the future also for Radisson? I mean, you're already strong in some resort destinations with the brand.
Yeah, I'm not 100% agreed that, let's say, the winners of the currency or the less penalized have been the resort segment, because I mean, you need to put everything always into economic, let's say, framework. And first of all, I mean, the resort business is characterized by a high concentration of the revenues in a very short period of time. And normally, the period of time coincides in today's month, let's say, weeks. So having to renounce, let's say, to the international demand in general makes them to sacrifice a lot of revenues. Then the investment, the huge investment, is immensely normally higher than the investment on an urban hotel. The level of service that you require in terms of also respecting, obviously, all the safety protocols that all companies are introducing makes most players very low, let's say, final profitability out of that. So if you operate, it depends on many factors. It depends on where you operate, if you have been granted or not with public subsidies, as we have done in the most of the European countries. We have been able to decrease most of the fixed structure we have. And the distribution of revenues in a more stable way, as it happens in the urban hotels, on a, let's say, medium-term horizon, can make, let's say, more profitable, let's say, or less suffering, let's say, a urban hotel than a resort. Coming back to Radisson strategy in resorts, I mean, we continue, and we are, let's say, proud of saying, as also Thomas was highlighting, the difficulties in securing the liquidity. Also, we have secured that with our shareholders, and we continue working, let's say, and keeping our main priorities of our 5-year plan. We are keeping more or less all of our CapEx investment, especially in technology. We're even accelerating some technology projects, so no delay at all. We are delaying some repositioning CapEx in some particular countries. Remember that we're an asset right company. We have out of 1,300 hotels, I'm only representing EMEA, but within Radisson Hotels, we have 2 companies. Total is 1,300 hotels. Out of that, in EMEA, we have 400. and in total we only operate 55 leases. So the remaining of our portfolio is asset light. And we continue with all the initiatives, so strengthen a lot all the distribution, all the revenue maximization activities, and we want to humbly become one of the top hotel operating companies in terms of the final profitability, the final GOP we can deliver to our hotel owners, because we believe that the growth is there. Resort is one of the areas in which we are pushing, but we like to get and to manage profitable business cases. So and that should come, as I said before, hand by hand from the beginning, with the right investment, with the right tools, and with the proper business cases. Whether it's an extended stay or a resort or urban hotel, I think that they can all fit. If it's the right, let's say, investment from the beginning, that determines with the right operating model.
The technical team tells me that we only have 5 minutes left, and you were right in our pre-discussion. I have too many questions again, but there's one last big question, and Fabrizio, I want to kick it off with you. For me, the current crisis is, I mean, as every crisis, I guess, it's also an opportunity. It's more a catalytic converter, you know, for making hotels maybe better than ever before. So what are your thoughts? What does the hotel of the future look like? Where is the real innovation in our industry? Will we see only evolution, or will there be also some revolution? You know, will we maybe also have to go a step back and consider, maybe some of the developments are not so good. We have to correct the course we've chosen. What are your thoughts? I will also include the others. The hotel of the future. How can we make better hotels? And maybe that's the focus. You know, maybe it is not infinite growth. Maybe the focus for the next year also needs to be on making those hotels we have better hotels.
Definitely, the hotel industry is changing. What's changing is even before this pandemic. You can see a lot of hybrid hotels coming through, you know, with a lot of new concepts like co-living, co-working, and of course the dramatic lessons that we had in these to reposition some of the investment that we were currently thinking to make some more traditional concept into something that will be able to, you know, take the needs of the new guests, young generation, sure, and very old generation. The hotel has this big chance in the next future, because it will be an alternative also to the, you know, how much costs life now in big cities, how much the square meters are expensive. So an alternative can be, you know, a repositioning of the hotel, probably not only 5 stars, but also some hybrid between 3 and 4 stars. Will be able to, you know, to host even different and transversal generation in the same moment. I strongly believe that tourism will never stop. Will be a big evolution, of course, on that, and technology will help us. Innovation, of course, is a must. But frankly speaking, I believe that new technology, new concept, the new study of spaces inside our hotels. Probably the MICE market will be a big review on that, as I told you before, because the companies will start to create processes inside the current business in order to control, you know, the day-to-day operation, even out of the office. But all the ones, I think, I see that as a big opportunity. And coming back to
they might kick us off the stage any minute, so I have to also include the others.
The last sentence. Hotel industry is a safe industry. It's probably safer than all the other alternative hospitality products. That's all.
Chema, what are your thoughts? Really, in a nutshell.
No, I think. I mean, I think will change less than we think. I think that if all the changes will be focusing automation and digitalization of core operational, let's say, processes, basically. I don't think that, and again, because the new shaping of the spaces, whatever, is something that is happening and updating as we speak, and it will be a constant for the future. So in my opinion, the major drastic change would be the introduce of this digitalization of operations. That is something that was happening, but now maybe it's a bit accelerated.
Markus?
I would say we go back to true hospitality. We've seen what happens to a lockdown when you close a country. So you come back to really the true hospitality, the meeting people, the being, a friendly host, taking care of your customers, being that in the hygienic way that you border across new borders, etc. And we will see much less questionable locations of new hotels. We will see a more conscientious choice of hotels. After all, this has been a forest fire. The big old trees, they've been standing, and they will continue to stand. The hotels like Frankfurt.
I think you were saying Frankfurt the whole.
Thomas and I know each other also for 30 years.
What a nice bridge over to Thomas.
That's true. The old trees, you mean, right? The future is good internet. You need good bandwidth, also in Nuremberg. No, I think in the essence of time, in 10 seconds, I believe in brands. I think clean brands will survive. You need to deliver the brand promise, and I think to the companies and the brands who anticipate the future guest clientele, and they're changing, as we know, with generations and demographics, will be the winners. I think if it's resort, if it's business, if it's economy, if it's global or local, it's back to the old hospitality tradition. Take care of your guests and your associates, and then you're the winners.
Oh, I love to hear that. And I remember some other webinar, and someone said, okay, soon we will be back to business as usual. And then I was intervening and said, no, please, let's not get back to business as usual. Let's really utilize this historic moment. Maybe there will be a little bit of a revolutionary element also going forward. You're all hoteliers at heart, and so am I, though I've never run a hotel in my life. But I think, we need to make sure going forward that hospitality, the spirit of hospitality, remains at the heart of this industry, including hotel project development, financing, and investment. So many thanks to all of you for joining this afternoon. You might have noticed we unfortunately lost Marlus on the way, but she decided to step down from the panel because of technical problems. Very sorry, but we'll continue the discussion, hopefully live at some point. Thank you very much. All the best. Stay safe, and let's meet for a beer or a glass of wine or whatever, hopefully in person very soon. Until then,
analog version, please.
Ciao.